The first thing he did was kneel down. Not with fear, not even because of what loomed before him, but because, in that hot, desolate wasteland, beneath a sky so blue and radiant it seemed almost like a falsehood, something within him broke. The final desperate shred of his belief in the world cracked. A girl stood bound to a weathered wooden stake, like an animal left for the sun to complete. A charred piece of clothing obscured her face, ropes biting so deeply into her wrists that the skin was dry and the color of dried blood. She did not cry. She did not scream. She barely stirred at all. Like she had stood there so long, she had forgotten how to ask for assistance. The desert that time of year was ruthless. Bone-dry, still, hot enough to sear skin from a man's back if he stood there too long. She had been standing there way too long. He came towards her slowly, each step deliberate, like a man not knowing if he was walking toward life or death. When he loosened the ropes that tied her, he worked each knot as if it held a tale too dense to speak. The silence between them wasn't blank. It was puffed with unsaid things, the sort of truths that men only tell on their deathbeds. Then she whispered, trembling soft words that would follow him through the rest of his days. Please, don't judge me when you see. He drew back the cloth. He didn't wince, but his knees folded beneath him, and he collapsed into the dirt. What was done to her wasn't violence, it was calculated cruelty. The kind designed to destroy a soul, to ensure no one ever had the courage to look at her again. Her eyes remained, still human, still pleading not for rescue, but for someone, anyone, to see her as a person once more. That's what shattered him. A woman left behind by the world, punished for something she'd never spoken, and a man who believed he was finished feeling. Discovering a stranger had just breathed life into him. Somewhere along that damned stretch of desert, where the heat was stifling and the quiet bore down, a shattered man came across an abandoned girl, and for an instant the entire world seemed to hold its breath. This was only the start. He didn't take her to the sheriff. He didn't bring her into town. Rather, he brought her home, if you could term it that, a decrepit cabin deep in the hills outside of Bisbee, long left behind by everybody but ghosts. The porch sagged, the washbasin was rusty, and the air inside still retained the faint smell of the woman who had been absent 10 years now. Her bed had remained untouched since the fever took her. But on this night, he placed the girl there with a softness he did not realize he still possessed. Like one misstep would shatter her utterly. She did not talk, did not ask for a drink, did not weep, simply gazed at the ceiling, as if she were still bound to that sun-cracked post. He left bread, a clean towel, and a pail of water, then sat on the porch, looking at nothing. By the morning, the bread had vanished. The towel was used, the water half consumed. But one thing was different. The old mirror over the washstand was covered. She'd thrown a towel over it. She did not wish to see herself. She was holding a needle that afternoon, hands shaking, eyes fixed on a piece of cloth. She wasn't sewing, merely clutching it as if the recollection of stitching was the only fragment of herself that she still possessed. He didn't ask questions, didn't even inquire about her name. And that's when she spoke once more. Her voice was weak, yet more stable than the first time. If I still know how to sew, does that mean I'm still a person? He didn't reply. He just left. When she came back to the room that night, there was a sewing frame on the bed and a folded piece of uncut white cloth. For a week, the cabin was quiet. Words were scarce, stares even scarcer. But silence has a way of loosening secrets. They arrived in pieces, a location here, a name there, falling off her tongue when she believed he wasn't paying attention. By the third evening, it was clear enough to get his blood raging hotter than the Arizona desert sun. Her name was June. She had been employed as a housemaid by the county judge in Tombstone. The judge's son, he wasn't the type to hear no twice. And when June menaced to reveal, they ensured her voice was silenced. The hard way. A rope. The middle of nowhere. And the law? The law was the judge. That was the moment Elias made his decision. He wasn't merely keeping a stranger alive, he was sitting on a powder keg. The next morning, June awoke to find the cabin empty. Outside, The hoofbeats sounded as they disappeared into the hills. By midday, Elias was in the doorway of the Crystal Palace saloon. The judge's boy was present. Laughing too hard, whiskey and full of himself. Elias didn't draw, didn't speak loud. He just dropped a folded white square of cloth on their table, the same table June had held onto in bed. The room went silent. "You know whose that is," Elias said. No words were spoken, but the expression on the boy's face told the truth to all the people in that saloon. Justice doesn't always strike in a bullet. It strikes in ensuring the world knows a man for what he truly is. By the time Elias rode out of town, the judge's son was sitting alone. And he'd remain so. Word travels quick in a small town. In Tombstone, it travels quicker when the judge's name is in the middle of it. By sundown, people weren't just whispering about the saloon, they were whispering about Elias. About how he'd entered the saloon unarmed and sent the judge's son out looking like he'd swallowed a rattlesnake whole. The judge didn't like that very much. Men such as himself never do. 2 nights afterwards, Elias was sitting on the porch, honing a knife he wasn't going to use, when he saw them, 3 horses riding hard. June was sewing under the lamp in the house. She didn't see. He did. The first man inside was huge enough to shadow half the light. The second had a nasty grin and the reek of rotten whiskey. The third didn't really count yet. "Judge wants a word." The big one growled. Elias didn't respond. Then the whiskey-breathed one made a fatal error. He reached for June. Elias caught his wrist, twisted till the bone cracked, and slammed him against the wall. He thudded to the floor before he knew he had fallen. The large one went for his belt, too late. Elias pushed him back out the doorway, boots scuffling on the porch, a single heartbeat from pulling his Colt. But he didn't need to. "Tell your boss," Elias said calmly. "If he wants her, he can come out here himself, and he'd do well to be prepared to face her eye to eye." No one protested. They pulled their friend aboard and rode off into the night. But riding away doesn't equate to it being over. That night, the desert quieted again, and something in June changed. She ceased to flinch at every creak. She left the mirror open. Some mornings, Elias woke to find her sewing on the porch at first light, the way his wife used to do. Weeks passed into months. The cabin, which had originally been a ghostly shelter at best, started to come alive. June stitched shirts, put in herbs outside the back of the house, even laughed when the mule attempted to swiping her bread. Elias never insisted that she speak. And then one night, when the sun dipped behind the hills, she said to him she didn't want to go home. Not because she was scared to leave, but because for the first time in a long time she felt like something other than the worst thing that had ever happened to somebody. He nodded, and they returned to the sky watching. Folks imagine the West was founded on guns and gold. Truth is, most of it was constructed on quiet acts, on keeping someone alive long enough for them to find themselves again. One day, maybe she'd leave, maybe not. But if another girl ever appeared on that porch with those same empty eyes, she wouldn't have to wait as long for someone to care. That's the thing about hard times out here. They can shatter you, or they can be the ones who stand next to someone when they help them up. So I'll ask you, if it were your decision, would you turn your back, or bear the burden with them? Perhaps this tale lingers with you because you've had your share of difficult days. Perhaps you've been June. Perhaps you've been Elias. Either way, stories like this still count, because they remind us that even in a town full of dust and blood, there can be kindness that takes hold. And if you want more stories like this, where heart meets grit, stay tuned. There's plenty more trail left to ride.